Some new faces. Welcome to everyone. My name is Ann Strickers, class of 96. I lived in Farley Hall, and I'm the regional director for the Pacific Northwest region. I'm excited to invite and welcome, welcome everyone to our second conversation. Today is with Packy Kelly. This is 1 month after our last conversation with Coach Neil Ivy. We're so excited, Packy, to have you here today for a number of reasons, but in particular, the month of October, which is dedicated to Our Lady and Our Lady of the Rosary, but also to breast cancer awareness. So just getting in under the final few days of October, and here we are to talk a little bit about your efforts, your story, and what we can do together. So without further ado, I'm going to get started. The chair of Notre Dame Women Connect, Karen, will be interviewing Packy. And then after that, a number of you have submitted questions. A number of our regional directors will read those questions. And then after that, we will have some time if people want to launch any words or stories or pieces in the chat. And I will also run a poll. So we'll get started. We wanted to take just a moment of silence, and we'll remember them at the end. The two students from Notre Dame, and I'll say their names at the end, but I didn't want to proceed today without acknowledging the death of two female students who we will remember in our prayers and just think about in our time together. Thank you. More on that at the conclusion. So let's begin. I'd like to introduce Karen Deheis, and she is the chair of Notre Dame Women Connect. Karen graduated from Notre Dame in 1985. She's enjoyed a 30-plus year career in nonprofit health and social services. She's currently serving as the chair of the Notre Dame Women Connect board. She's the proud mom of 3 girls, including 1 Notre Dame grad and a current ND student. Karen is especially looking forward to tonight's conversation because she is a 9-year breast cancer survivor herself. Thank you, Karen. Welcome, Karen.
Thank you, Anne. It's great to be here with everybody today and to have Packy here as our guest. It's my pleasure to introduce Packy tonight. I'm going to say just a few words about her background, and then we'll have a great conversation and learn more all about her story. Many of us, of course, know Packy as the wife of Notre Dame's head football coach, Brian Kelly. But tonight, we're happy to focus on Packy's role as the co-founder and the board president of the Kelly Cares Foundation. After her own experience as a breast cancer patient and survivor, she built an organization focused on advancing efforts against a disease that affects 1 in 8 women. We know we have people on the call tonight who've been affected, and we're so happy you were able to join us for this important conversation. Packy is a well-known advocate and champion in the fight against breast cancer, and we're grateful that she's here to share her story. Welcome, Packy.
Thank you for having me. I'm
Sure.
quite for the invitation.
So, Packy, how about if we start out by learning a little bit about you? We'll talk about your breast cancer story in a moment, but we know something about your role in the Notre Dame family, and we're thrilled you're a part of the Notre Dame family, but we wonder if you could share a little about your own family. I understand you grew up in a pretty big family. Could you tell us about that?
Yes, I'm one of 6 daughters. My dad was a saint for sure, and the first 5 of us are within 6 years of each other, so a true Catholic family. And my youngest sister is, I think, 7 years younger than I am, so there's a little bit of gap there. But so my mom and dad met when he was in the military, and she's originally from Madrid, Spain, or just outside. So when we got here, we were pretty close knit in terms of all our ages and whatnot. And my dad had a very strong passion for the game of baseball, so apparently he was trying to field a team, but only got girls. But he ended up coaching us for a long time. But we're a pretty competitive group growing up and understand team play and stuff. So I think between the ladies, I get one of those things you say in your youth of 20 or something after you're dated enough guys, and you said, I'm never going to date another athlete ever again, even though I was in sports. Sure enough, circle back. You don't think my college friends didn't circle back and say, well, didn't you say you were never going to date another athlete? I said, he's not He's the coach, the difference. So going forward, Brian and I actually both met after college, and we met when we were working at Grand Valley State, and hit it off and got married and had 3 kids. And shortly after the third kid, I think it was 36 or 37 when I was 36 when I found the lump, and 37 when I was diagnosed. So
So-
then my journey of being a cancer patient began.
Well, so let's pivot and let's talk a little bit about that. And I think we'll talk a little bit more about your family a little later. Tell us,
Okay.
it's 2002. I think you're teaching chemistry, if I'm correct. Tell us what happened, and maybe Pocky, if you can, maybe expand a little bit and tell us about how you were feeling, what you were thinking when that started.
Yeah. Anyone who's gone through breast cancer, and everyone's story is a little bit different, but mine was kind of I feel like I got everything kind of backdoor in the terms of how that all progressed, and that information came to me. So I actually went to my OBGYN checkup after my youngest Kenzel was, he just turned 2, and I usually was teaching then. So most of my stuff was done in the summertime. And, he just suggested, we'd like you to have get a mammogram and stuff before you're 40. So we have a baseline, and then whenever that's convenient for you. So I said, okay. And I was always pretty good about going to my annual checkups even before I was sick. So I just did it in December after I was done with school. And it was at 8 o'clock. I'm not going to tell you that it was December 22nd, but my husband had gone to the championship for the first time. So we'd been 4 weeks straight of weekends not in town. And thank goodness the kids were small, because some of the stuff you could hide. But the reality was we were trying to do a crash course of Christmas in a short amount of time. And he's like, when are you coming back? I got some shopping to do. I said, well, I wasn't doing very well because I was failing my first mammogram, basically with some ultrasounds and other stuff. But they basically said, you don't have any of the markers. There's this thing we don't like, just come back in 6 months and we'll check on it, but you don't worry about a thing. So that was December. And in April, I decided that it's getting bigger. So then I go in and get checked before the 6 months marker. And we decided just take it out, and then I don't have to worry about it. And then it really wasn't until after my first lumpectomy that the biopsy showed that I was a cancer patient. So then I started later in that summer to schedule a second surgery, and then line up chemo and radiation treatments after that.
So you
and
had
honestly, it was one of those things that was so backdoor. Like I already worried about it for 4 or 5 months, even though I knew I didn't have cancer, and they said I didn't have cancer. All the things that you worry about. Oh my gosh, my kids are so young, and at that point I had 3 kids under the age of 5. So yeah, I was a little stressed, but I was in pretty good health. So I think they're probably right. So, but due diligence. Had I not gone in, fast forward 5 years, and I realized that we were a high risk. We had a high risk gene of we're 3 of the 6 sisters are BRCA1 carriers, and we missed it because my dad was all male family. But if you dug a little bit further, his mother was one of 13 siblings, and she passed away at 40, in her 40s, 43, I think. So we think of girl problems is what he was told. He was probably 13 at the time when she passed away. So it was, it's kind of unreal. Do I have any really circumstantial stuff that says that's probably where that's where it came from? And because nothing really comes from on my mom's side in terms of the cancer. And it's been a story, where we've all had to get involved, obviously, my sisters and I, and had to share those. But it was kind of, I'm going to tell you the hardest days I had when I initially told the story, or had to tell people, was when I had to tell my boss I wasn't coming back to work. Was a tough day. And Brian said, Pocky, you're gonna have to tell your mom. And I knew she wouldn't take it well. My sisters are a little, but my mom's a worrier, and not as easygoing as I am. I mean, she's a fun lady, but not easygoing with that kind of news. And she really struggled. He goes, I'll tell her if I have to, but she's got to know. I said, I'll do it. So, but those were like those late days I remember well, in terms of how hard it was to share the story, because all of a sudden it for some reason really seemed real.
Oh, thank you so much for sharing your family story with us. And we can only imagine, moms are moms, right? So it's telling your mom bad news, you know how much she loves you, you know how much she's going to be worried about you. Um, so thank you very much for sharing that. Tell us about you as a mom. So you said you had three children under five, chemo, radiation, surgery. What was on your mind in terms of your own family, the family you were raising when you had your first diagnosis and treatment?
So, being the first one going through it and not really having anyone that I've known go through it, I probably, and I always try to tell people when I share these stories that I'm a very lighthearted person and probably take the humor I use is really with the way I managed to get through it, but
Mm.
take things as they roll and roll with it. Um, I remember laying, again, Kenzel's probably two, a little over two, and I had long hair at the time. And I said, I remember Brian was home and it was before the season had started or just before the season. I think my first chemo, they give you a pamphlet if any of you guys have ever been through this that reads like stereo instructions because everyone reacts differently to medicine and like, oh, look at all these things that could go wrong or how that's going to affect you and whatnot. And you're just kind of like, okay, well, we'll just roll with that. Um, I have a very sensitive stomach. I'll share with all of you. So I eat very blandly. So they're trying to tell us if you need any medicine, if you get sick, it's not like it used to be. And Brian's like, oh, she's going to be sick. And we're like, well, we have stuff and all this stuff for anti-nausea. It's like, yeah, we both had conceded before that I was not going to be the people that doesn't get sick. And we worked through, that was a little bit of a bit of a grind for me. But workable, the scary part was, as you read through some of those things and how you're feeling, I felt really good except for the first 2 days after chemo. And then I had 2 weeks off between and another week off or 2 weeks between the next chemo. So I'm like, felt like it was a bad week and then 2 great weeks. So kind of muddled through all that. And we were both very excited when it was done. And everyone reacts very differently to it. But the funnier story was, they told us when my hair would fall out, if it was going to fall out. And I'm like, I don't think it's going out, Brian. I think it's going to stay. I might be one of the exceptions. And I'm wrestling on the floor with Kenzel, and he rolled on my hair, and like a whole patch of it was just sitting on the floor. So I'm like, okay, maybe not. So I went to like some place to get it cut to a pixie, and then we ended up we had a hair shaving party for both times when my hair was falling out for both chemos. And if I could share, go fast forward for my second chemo treatment. Pat was the oldest one at the time, obviously the first time, and remembers more of it. And here we are in Cincinnati, and we're trying to coerce these neighborhood boys to shave my head because, I mean, how often do you get to shave somebody's head? Very rarely. And they're like, no, 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 we've done this before. Pat's trying, come on down. She doesn't care. And then he's like, listen, I'm pretty sure if I shave your mom's head, I will be grounded for life by my mom. So he was like, not even gonna go there. So, but great group of kids. That's kind of stuff that we did to get through it.
Hmm. It's when you say, how certain moments made things feel real. I will say my own experience was that when I lost my hair, that not only made it feel real, but because it changes your physical appearance, it made me feel very much like a patient. I felt like someone fighting through before, but then it made me feel like a patient.
Right.
Were there moments as you went through that you thought about, you thought you were on top of things, and then other times when it didn't? You seem like such a positive person, Pocky.
Yeah. So this is one of my, I remember this very well. So I'm not very vain. I'm going to probably to a default. I'm not very vain. And I remember looking at it, I'm like, okay, my hair's all gone. I'm kind of look like my dad now, who's been bald he's got a Caesar hair or had a Caesar hair at the time. And I'm like, I walk very fast. I create my own draft and it's windy back there. And this is, as time went on, it was like August and stuff, or late August when it was falling out. But I was pretty much bald by September. It was chilly, coming to October with no hair. So I said, I won't bother you anymore, Dad, about complaining about wearing a hat. He's like, it's cold in here. I said, it's just drafty because you're moving too fast. But when I looked in the mirror and thought, gosh, if this bothers me a little bit, the people that, that they take the time every day to get ready and do stuff to get ready for work and very prim, this would be really hard for them because there's not, a wig that's going to change it. And I mean, it's going to help a little bit, but for some people, it really made me more sympathetic in terms of, or more empathy toward those people in terms like there's not a lot they can do while this is going through where it didn't bother me that much, so I was thankful for my ability not to worry about it too much. On my husband's end, he was, they're always trying to be very supportive. And the thing that probably killed him was I asked him, and try not to laugh out loud. One of the only things that was normal during this time for me was I wasn't working, I don't remember the last time I hadn't worked. And I've got, 2 kids that are preschoolers, and I'm just taking one kid to kindergarten. It's like every part of my aspect of my life had changed because of my sickness. And so he's like wanting to take off work to go to my chemo appointments. I said, honey, I just need you to just do what you do. Because right now that's the only thing that's normal in my life. And it was like the one thing that was constant, which is laughable that his schedule was my constant, but it was, in terms of what was normal for our family. So he really struggled, and I had my friends fill in when I needed that other person there with me. He really just showed up when they would put me under in case something unfortunate would happen, but we were blessed not to have any of those things or those hiccups occur. And probably the other thing that made me laugh was he tried, I'm as bald as a cue ball, Kojak bald, and he went and bought me some earrings, 2 different kind of gold earrings, just because now I need to look at my earrings because you can see my ears very clearly when you're bald. And if you want to see what that looks like, it looks like this. So he opened up these and I put them in. He goes, well, go put them in. He was very encouraging. I put them in, and I can't even stop laughing as I'm walking back out because I look like Mr. Clean. and, and he really was trying to be very sweet and said, but with all the warmness in his heart that he did that, it's like, I'm trying to help you in his way. But he did finally laugh. But I said, or do I look like the Scrubbing Bubbles lady? I don't know. But he finally said, yeah, you do look a little bit like Mr. Clean. And I said, I know, it's okay. It's only for a little while. But those kind of things get you through and make you laugh, and know that you're on the same page, and we're still trying to do the nice things that you need for support.
And what a great blessing that you now are healthy and can laugh about that and look back on it with that kind of warmth and that kind of memory. That's so special. Paki, let's just talk one more question about your story, and then we'd love to pivot and hear about your work at Kelly Cares. But 2007 comes along, and you thought you had everything behind you, and wonder what you remember most about the second diagnosis and about what followed that.
Well, so the way it all worked out, again, kind of like I said, I kind of got backhanded the information. So when I was diagnosed the first time, I was truly considered an anomaly because I didn't have any family connections. But then my older sister, she's 3 years older than I am, she was diagnosed in 2005. And so she had the BRCA1 gene test done, which then I followed and did it, which was no surprise that I had it. So then at that point, the only thing I did was, they want you to get a double mastectomy right away and an oopectomy, so that you're no way going to get this or really reduce your chances of getting breast cancer again. And then I struggled with that because my youngest son, Kenzel, only has seen me sick. I mean, and now he's 3 or 4 years old, and all he's ever seen me do is go through these, for the process of healing, right? I said, you know what, let's just give me, I did all this chemo and all this radiation for me to make my 5-year marker. And if I don't make my 5-year marker, I'll get a double mastectomy, no questions asked. And in the end, the type of, I had my good news was I had 2 different types of cancer, breast cancer. The first one was not hormone positive. The second one was, so it's not considered a reoccurrence, which is a good thing. But it's still cancer, so it still has to be treated. And but it made my decision, and I try to share that with people, when they're trying to make that decision to get a mastectomy, which is a huge, it's a huge operation. And I've never had any operation other than my teeth getting pulled at 18. So plus I still have 3 kids that are now under the age of, 8 or 9. So going through that, it was like I think the hardest part about that was we had just moved in April to Cincinnati. and that was quite a ways. I had at least a little bit of a home base with my friends and families from in GR in Battle Creek, Michigan. And, 5 and 6 hours away is a little not quite as convenient. Plus, we hadn't really established, any mom connections like to pick up kids and all
Yep.
that, and sports and all that. Um, but the place we moved to was like Mayberry. So God was probably watching over us then too, saying, this is where you should live. And they came out in hordes and in support for a family that we just got there. So we were really fortunate. The kids really were able to adapt. If you know my daughter Gracie, she's all that in a bag of chips. And her comment as a 7-year-old was, we basically sprung it on the kids Sunday night before I'm going in on Monday for the lumpectomy. And she's like, now, wait a minute. Didn't you say that we were done with the doctors? Like, she actually remembers that conversation that we had after I was done with all the chemo and stuff for the first time around. So, well, we thought we were, but I thought they did a pretty good job of handling all that and managing it in terms of the new move and the new situation of me being sick again.
Well, those people who are in your life who play those roles, the mom network, the people who are your friends, it
For
must have
sure.
been a particular challenge to move at the time that happened.
Right.
Notre Dame Women Connect is actually all about connecting, obviously, Notre Dame women in the Notre Dame family. And we're especially glad to have you here today with all the folks on the call. Female friendships, I think I'm going to say, to me personally, are very valuable, and male friendships are valuable, but I will say the female friendships are valuable to me in very unique ways. Who are the women who've played a role in your life as friends and in your women network?
Well, I'm gonna have to go with some of my sisters. They were very much there, and my roommates from college. I know that they've done stories and stuff with them and videoed it, but I called in on them because they all lived in Grand Rapids when I went through it the first time. And my sister Rosie, who's probably 90 minutes away in Battle Creek at the time, said, I feel like we're not doing anything for you. I said, well, thank God for that, because she's the one I'm going to have to call if I was to get sick and hospitalized, you know what I mean, to take care of my kids. Where my other friends, it was like they just come in the day that I'd get treatment and stick around for 2 days and make sure I got the kids down or, out to the door on a rough chemo day or whatnot. So I really had, if there's a red carpet, chemo treatments and stuff, I think I felt like I went through it pretty quickly and without too many scars or whatnot, other than losing my hair. I didn't have to be hospitalized or have any low white blood count days where I got sick or anything like that. So those truly were blessings. But the people come out in many different ways, and they look at you, and I think, I don't know if it's just a mom thing. I say it's a mom thing, but I don't know, but they came out and they reached out. And so I want you to picture, we still don't just, Brian's never around, and they brought so much food in Cincinnati when we were there. I'm like, I don't even know where to put all this food. And we didn't live, that was a little more spread out. It's like Chicago, and people would drive 45 minutes to drop off food for us to make sure we had food. And like I said, it was so that was kind of an overwhelming thing, which, if I can lead into what Kelly Cares was about, we had already started paperwork to start a foundation prior to me getting sick the second time, but it went on hold because of me getting sick. But it was kind of like, I always tell a joke that, God gave it to me twice because I wasn't moving fast enough, apparently, on moving the foundation into play. But it was, the things you saw along the way and the people you see, as much as I love teaching, by the way, and it was really hard for me to leave it. And even with that, all the things that I've benefited from personally, in terms of seeing what joy and hope you can give people through nonprofits, and what other people do on a day-to-day basis, it's overwhelming, because I thought I got a lot out of my work before, and now I just see a whole lot more of it times 10. And I would still go back to teaching in a second. It's just a totally different level of giving, and it's personal giving. It's just listening and sharing for who you are and what you've gone through. Sometimes they just want to hear that.
Yeah, I have to say I'm a nonprofit professional, 30 years. I've done that in multiple cities in the United States. And every time we've moved, I said we get to meet the nicest people in town, and the people who make the backbone of the community are those kinds of people. Paki, we want to talk about the Kelly Cares Foundation. We thought maybe we'd give you a chance to catch your breath. And Anne, maybe we could launch our meeting poll. We'd love to hear from the folks on the call about 2 questions: whether or not you've personally experienced a breast cancer diagnosis, and perhaps you've been touched in another way. You've had a loved one who's had a breast cancer diagnosis. So we'll let folks answer those, and Anne will tell us what we learned. What do you see, Anne?
Thank you. Our first question is, have you personally experienced a breast cancer diagnosis? So we had 36 respondents, and 6 out of 36, so 17% of people gathered here today have carried that burden, and the other percentage, 81%, no. Number 2, have you had a loved one who has received a breast cancer diagnosis? 81% of people on this call are touched by that. Thank you to everybody.
Thank you, everybody. So Paki, that tells us something you might have already guessed probably, which is the degree to which this disease touches so many people, certainly so many people on this call. And I imagine that was a big part of why you started Kelly Cares. But could you tell us kind of the background on tell us the mission of the Kelly Cares Foundation? Tell us about the types of organizations you support. Is it just breast cancer, or are there other causes as well?
So we have 3 pillars, which are, both Brian and I are educators. And so we wanted that to be part of it. And, we truly take the nuts and bolts of really building a community. If you have a strong education as a pillar and a strong health as part of your community, then the community itself should thrive and get better, or, improve. So that was kind of our outlying idea in terms of how we can make things better for other people, and using the platform of Kelly Cares and even Notre Dame, as we finally got here and got that up and running. It was just a way we could give back. And like any other nonprofit, they want you sometimes to be very specific. Obviously my story, we started off with, well, let's do a third, and this is how we're going to break it down. And I don't have to fool anybody to let you know that healthcare is expensive. So that kind of blew that whole budgeting idea right away. But what we've kind of done instead is, look at, this will be a year where we concentrate on education and or concentrate on community and or health. So we've tried to get involved. For me personally, one of the callings I felt I had was to share my story, because not everybody wants to share their story, and that's okay. And I try to tell people that is absolutely fine. My sister, who was the second diagnosed person, and the third sister, who is also my oldest sister, who, by the way, smokes, and she'd be like, of all the candidates of the 6 sisters, she'd probably be the first one that people would say she probably was going to get it. She has the gene, but never got it. She opted to have a double mastectomy without ever getting cancer, which is awesome. That's I had another type of bravery right in itself. And I said, as we move forward, what impact we wanted to have was, it doesn't bother me to share my story. And by sharing my story, it got more people, hopefully, to take their annual mammogram more seriously. And had I not gone, let's be clear, had I not gone at 37 and waited 3 years, I may not be here to tell my story. And I had no inclinations that I was sick at all. I was just going because my doctor said, try and go ahead and get your, your baseline in. And, this was at a time. So if you were to go back and look at some of the statistics, 1 minute there, it's 50 that you get it. Next minute it's 40, maybe it's 45. And, so it was all up in the air with different influences, both politically and just a pre-existing condition. I mean, there was a lot of things that were kind of scary initially. For me, it was scary because there was only like 200 cases for the BRCA1 at the time when I was diagnosed. And I'm thinking, if you guys know anything about statistics, that's probably not a big enough pie to make a big decision like that. And it's still one of the places that you go and send up for your genetic testing. But now there's, thousands of people that have tested in terms of, making those numbers more secure. But they were dead on. And if I would have, I always wondered what would have happened had I made it my 5-year marker, because then I would have gone to 1 year, checkups. Because from the time that I was diagnosed till the time my sister was diagnosed 2 years later, I was on MRI 6 months and then a mammogram on the other 6 months. So, and I developed it between March of '07 and September of '07 when we moved. So,
Fast
it
moving.
grows quickly. Mine were very, very quickly growing. So I was just to get both of them in an early stage was because of due diligence. And so it's not one of those things you can just ignore. And it's one of the things I share when people ask me to talk. It's like, the more upfront you are with the knowledge of cancer, the quicker you're going to beat it. And not just wait it out. That's a plan in terms of that. So, we've gone forward with it and sharing some of those stories, and being able to help different, like St. Joseph Regional Hospital here and their foundation, that talk about open arms. They sent me stuff before I even moved from Cincinnati to be part, because Brian was already here to be the honorary person for their Secret Sisters. And, so there's so many people in the nonprofit that are doing so many good things for all these niches of people that need help. And that's, it takes, if I could share anything about being a nonprofit starter person up, or someone who started one from the ground up, is that if you've got people that are passionate about what they're trying to do and make a positive change, it doesn't take long before people will want to get on that ride, on that bus ride, to make a positive, because that's what people are trying to do. They're not trying to, if they're doing that kind of nonprofit, they're doing it to make a positive change. So having the ability to be able to spread that love and that help from Kelly Cares has been very humbling, and also empowering and dutiful in a way, because part of the hardest part about COVID-19 was that we had to pretty much close down because of all of our events are
Yes.
many people, and losing our three main money makers for the year due to it was obviously a little bit of a blow, and it's kind of a setback. But at the same time, it was, I wanted to help out everyone locally that were needing, Boys and Girls Club. They needed iPads for these kids staying at home, and lunches, and how to organize that. But it was amazing to watch all of them rally around each other and find a way to make it happen.
Yeah, the way that people have pivoted during the pandemic to take the hard work that they already do and make that work amenable to what the needs are and how those needs are changing so rapidly. It's so inspiring.
It is.
Paki, you mentioned the Kelly Cares events. I myself had the pleasure of attending Football 101. At least one of my children has been to Pink Zumba, but as you said, this year is different.
Mhm.
Those events are not going on. What's going on this year with the foundation, and are the plans at this point, even with the uncertainty that we have, to bring those events back when hopefully we put the pandemic into a more manageable situation?
Yeah, we're basically in a holding pattern right now in terms of, we're doing some outreach with people calling us and saying, can you help with this, and that? But our outward, most, 90% of 95% of our fundraising was through events. So it was, trying to find a new way to do the events and still make an impact. So some of the things have been more like sharing my story here with you guys, and doing some of that stuff locally. And some of them are ones that we've had established, like Pack a Backpack, and I mean, we're still doing some of those donations. We're still trying to figure a way to where we found a way to still do our we have a thing where we did shop with the players in Myers. So we've manipulated it a little bit and still making some of them work. It's not the same, and I'm just kind of, actually it took me a little bit. It's like, you know what, we're not gonna be able to do our big fundraiser that we do in New York. But then, like, after a month of letting that settle, and I'm like, really? You think a month later we're gonna be able to do the other two? We have two back to back, our Football 101 and our golf outing. Probably not gonna happen either. But, it took, like, slowly, it kind of sunk in. I'm like, okay, yeah, we're just gonna have to put the brakes on a little bit and just step back and see what we can do. And we're just gonna see what that time frame and plan will be, because part of it's nothing that, I can say, hey, let's have Zumba, but then we don't have a place to have Zumba. So
Right.
So, and in the end, it's not worth getting anyone sick over. So we're just trying to get everybody healthy, wealthy, and wise. Um, and then move, I'm kind of in my head put into 2021 to see what's that gonna look like for us.
Okay. Well, thank you. That leads us to the last question that we had planned. And then what we'd love to do is pivot to our questions from the participants. And I guess, Paki, you talked a lot about your advocacy for encouraging people to get that mammogram, encouraging people to take care of themselves. And that's so inspiring. I will say also that your personal story about your treatment and your recovery is inspiring. I know I've shared with you that at Football 101 in 2011, some things you said to me were very inspiring. We'd like to know though, Paki, who inspires you? Who are the people in the world, maybe women, maybe men, who are inspirational to you?
Oh, wow. Well, the more I learn, I tell you, this year has been a lot of a year reflective of,
Mm.
I look back at all the things that have happened that are both positive and negative. I still am a true believer, of the grassroots person that one of the things I've told people is you don't have to be, it doesn't have to be mighty. It just has to
Mm.
be you and what you do, and many, because like, I want to help. I'm like, what is it that you do? Because no one's going to ask me to come make some socks because I can't do any of that stuff. They're not going to ask me to paint. That's not the talents that God gave me. And so I said, you just got to figure out what your talent is and your time frame, because it isn't every time. I look back in the last 20 years, when could have I done all these things? Like God lined some of these things up for me, I'm sure. But at the same time, we all can do it. What do you feel comfortable with? If you're the person that does the setup, whatever it is, I said, just find something that makes you feel good and that you're contributing. It's no different than anything else you do at work. There's certain things at your work that you do really well, and there's certain things that I still need to work on. And it's that finding that passion and what's important. That I do tell people to share that I thought I knew a lot until I did this job, and then I learned a whole lot more. But as far as you know, there's a lot of people that there's people that well, and there's people that are brave, and people that I could share stories with you that you don't know their names, but they move me just as much as like I have a lot of respect for Condoleezza Rice and the things she's done, and Michelle Obama, and not trying to get political or anything, just people I've got to meet along the way that have made an impact to people. And that's not why they did it. They did it because they wanted to make the world a better place. And those are inspirational people.
Well, thank you very much. Notre Dame Women Connect tried to create this series to highlight inspiring women. You're certainly one of those, and we appreciate the time in answering the questions. I think we're going to pivot now to talk about some of the questions we got from our participants. And I believe, Donna, are you up first?
I am. Hi,
Great.
Paki. This question comes from Maureen. She's a double domer, 78 and 80, and a member of the Notre Dame Club of Jersey Shore. How do you incorporate your faith as you march through your treatment?
I incorporate my faith every day. Actually, I find a blessing, in terms of, some of the things that are hardships that you go through and some of the frustration parts of running any nonprofit. But I truly believe that God put me here for a reason. And I thought, we all think this is what I should be doing. And I know that I'm supposed to be doing these things, and I'm thankful for the opportunity to do those things and help people. When you talk about every day, I see, whether it's if you see somebody in a hospital that's going through some things, or a family member that's struggling with someone who's struggling, those are hard things to deal with, but people just need a little love and reassurance that it's okay, and it's okay to share, and that other people are there for you. I think especially when you're going through, there are some people that I went through breast cancer, and they didn't have anybody there sitting with them. Their husband was trying not to miss work, and grandma's sitting there with the babies at home, and those are all things that I was very blessed that I had all those things covered, even when I moved to a new city. So that's God's way of saying, you know, we can do this, and we do it one day at a time, and everyone's journey is different. But if we all know that we're not alone, and obviously you women are signing up to here to listen to my story, I'm sure you're all doers in your own right in terms of trying to make a positive impact and making change in a positive way. Um, and some days we do it better than others, and other days we don't. But we continue to get up and do those things because it's there. And and if we don't do it, who's going to do it? I guess that's part of it. It's like, I know the things we're doing is making a positive change.
Awesome, thank you. It sounds to me like, or it seems as though you never had one of those why me moments, why me God moments. Did you?
You know what? I didn't really have a why me moment, but I remember, which is I always kind of still laugh at this. One of my tough days was when I actually got the record or the test back that I was positive for the BRCA1, which is kind of funny because I'd already had it, right? And I think, I said to Brian, I go, I hope you don't know this, but you got damaged goods, honey. I didn't know about it before. I didn't come clean with you, but I just didn't know. And he's like, no, kind of, because we're always tongue in cheek in it, but he's like, no, you're good in every sense. And I said, even when I told him that I was sick, or, he kept asking, did you get the stuff back the first time? I said, well, honey, I am 1 in a million, because that's what the guy said. It'll be 1 in a million that you have cancer. I told him I was 1 in a million. And, but that was a tough day. That was for certainly, it's like, again, it was already past me, but it's still solidified. And maybe the fact that I had still another battle in front of me, I knew that did not, I went from being, 95% cured to 85% chance I'm going to get it before 5 years was out. So that made it a little more real the second time around.
Erin's up.
Hi, Packy. Thank you for being here. I'm class of 80. I have a question a little more a little more practical, maybe, from Louisa an alumna. She wants to know if you made any dietary and/or lifestyle changes significantly after your treatment.
Those are good questions. So, I was a Diet Coke fan and still am to some degree. And I was jumping on the healthy kick, and I went to the doctors, quite regularly initially. And I said, hey, I've got this green tea. I'm really kicking it with the green tea. And he's like, well, okay, well, how much are you drinking? About 2 of them a day. And he's like, okay, do you like green tea? I said, no, I don't like green tea. He's like, well, you probably need about 2 gallons of it a day. So, he was really honest with me in terms of what kind of impacts. I mean, obviously 2 is better than none, because there's probably other avenues. Do you like spinach? I said, yeah. He goes, just eat spinach salads then. That'll probably help you more than the green tea, in terms of the bigger impact. So, as a patient trying to make those decisions, you have to ask a lot of questions. And, thank goodness he asked me the questions of how much I liked it and how much I was drinking, because I made a better choice changing other things than just my green tea and whatnot. Health wise, I slowed down a little bit after my radiation. I think that's when I believe my thyroid went out. So since then, I actually kept my weight the same during chemo, which is not usually what happens. Usually you gain weight because of the medicine. But as soon as chemo was over, I started radiation, and thyroid went out. A couple months goes by, and Brian's like, you feeling okay? You look a little swollen. Thought I had hives. No, I'm just tired, honey. So finally we called the doctor, and I put on like 30 pounds since radiation started till the time they're like, you probably should have called sooner. And, I was still trying to lose all the weight but it was like, I just couldn't get ahead of it. And finally I needed thyroid medicine to get my metabolism going again. So those were kind of little surprises along the way. Other than that, I try to, I don't really like to run anymore because I'm older. So I just play tennis. I play tennis at least 3 times a week to count that as instead of getting on the treadmill.
That's awesome. It's great that you can still do that too. Thank you.
Yep.
Trudy? Trudy, you're muted.
Sorry, try to do that out of,
No?
I'm Trudy Cassidy, and I'm the regional director here for Notre Dame Women Connect in the West Region. And in light of your discussion about predisposition, one of the questions that we have is rather pertinent. It's from a parent from the Notre Dame Club of Cincinnati. And she wants to know what advice you might have for talking with a daughter who might have the possibility of a genetic predisposition for breast cancer.
So the mother part of me is obviously makes this a little tougher. And apparently like Dolly had said earlier about what you say to your kids and they start to acquire what you say after many years. She's taken a light humored stuff. I've taken jabs from my kids about, yeah, Mom, thanks for the gene pool all along. They kind of understand the science behind it. However, we were fire doctors. It's not like the boys can't carry the gene. They just have to be tested like everybody else. But Gracie, the good news is the information is becoming more and more precise, I should say. So they originally told me, oh, don't worry, until she's like in her mid 30s or whatever. And now they're saying whatever age I was first diagnosed, take 10 years back. And so when Gracie's 27, that's when she should, start getting mammograms and whatnot she's probably not at risk before then. And I can tell you as my sister, one of the three that is BRCA1, her middle daughter was positive and at 31 had a double mastectomy in the last 2 years. So, it has gone to that next generation. Right now, Gracie hasn't been tested or anything. And I said, you can get tested anytime you want. I'm just telling you what the doctor said, that you're really not probably at risk until your late 27 is the earliest that they thought that she would need to. I don't know if that's going to change. Originally when I went through this, do you get her tested right away? She was young, the first time, and they said she doesn't need to worry about it right now. But as that information continues, I keep trying to keep abreast of what if there's any changes for her sake.
Great, Donna.
Okay, our next question is from Haley, class of 95 from Lions Hall, the Lions. She's an alum and a current parent. She says, my mom was diagnosed with breast cancer again for the second time. How do you deal with the fear of recurrence?
So I really think that by the time, I feel like I'm not the best person to ask that question because I felt like I knew I was going to get it again with statistics, in terms of, if I don't make it to my 5-year marker at that time. And, I guess at the end probably cost me another chemotherapy treatment is what it really backed me up. But I don't think I would do it differently. And I think there is that real, I guess for me, I was so adamant, I'm going to tell you this honestly, as a patient, if I take them off, then I don't know where the cancer is going to go. You know what I mean? The games you play, if I keep my breast, then I know exactly where to look for the cancer. You know what I mean? Which is not really the mindset you should go with, except you're probably just avoiding what's coming, right? Sometimes it's that. And I said, but in the end, I guess for me, knowing the statistics in terms of those made my decisions a lot easier. So I really wasn't surprised on the second diagnosis for me personally, because statistically I should have gotten it again. And I did. And I share that with people saying, listen to what they're saying. You know what I mean? If there's a 14% chance of you getting it, then that's something you're going to have to look at. If there's a really higher percentage, and depending on what your individual age is or your family situation is, then you have to look at those pieces too. Because I've had friends ask me to talk to their parents. Well, they're not going to chemotherapy. You know what? He's 74 years old. If he doesn't want to go to chemo, I don't think he should have to go to chemo. You know what I mean? He knows how his body's acting. Because they wanted to put him on a low dose. And I said, I can't, I'll talk to him, but I can definitely see what he's thinking versus, the kids that are 45 and whatnot.
Great. Erin, are you up next?
I believe so. I have a question from Gail, a Notre Dame parent, and she's wondering what advice you would give, Packy, to a person with a recent diagnosis of breast cancer.
So recently, I mean, there are some things I'm abreast, and I'm going to just say this because the things that changed between my there wasn't even 5 years between my two diagnoses. And even in that short amount of time, things changed dramatically because they continue to make, different procedures, both like nipple saving was one back in that time. And now they're not doing, I mean, how they operate and do surgery, how they do treatments, localized high radiation versus leaving small radiation tablets in you and killing tumors that way. I can't even begin to keep track of all of it in terms of what's out there. And that's what your doctors are for. And I always say, make sure you feel comfortable with your doctors, and always please take somebody with you. This, what you hear and what you hear is during the whole consult is quite different, and what they take away from it. At least that's what Brian and I found out. It's like what he was listening to and what I was listening to was not even on the same page, but between the two of us, we got most of it. And, again, because cancers are so different in the locations and how operable they are, there are so many that I can, as a patient, I can never feel like I can give a whole lot of advice in terms of what would you do, because I get that question. But what I did and the choices I made were based on someone who was 37 with 3 kids under the age of 5, and someone who was 41 with 3 kids under the age of 8 or 9. So those choices and how you work through them and what kind of support you have makes a big difference too.
Thank
Great.
you.
I think we have time for one more question. Trudy, do you have one more from our audience?
Actually, this one is from me.
Okay.
And Packy, maybe this is with regard to some of your work with the Kelly Foundation. I'm not sure if you're aware, but men also obviously have breast cancer. And although they only account for 1% of all breast cancers overall, there's still 2,000 per year. And so I'm wondering if you're aware of research studies that are being conducted that isolate by gender, and if so, whether or not some of the cures are specific to men versus women.
No, I don't have any of that information that is that specific for that question. That the one I was speaking to before about the friend who asked me to talk to her dad, he was a breast cancer survivor, and that wanted, who literally ran 10 miles before his operation that day, and takes aspirin is a big deal. He bounced back a lot faster than I did from my double mastectomy, I guarantee you. And I do know that the people don't think that, and a lot of guys don't think that they can get it, but the reality is they can. The rest of, in terms of genetically, I don't have that information, so I don't know that I can honestly answer that with any kind of validity.
Thanks.
Well, Packy, you have done such a great job of answering so many questions for us and sharing your story so personally. We definitely want to wrap up and thank you. I would be remiss if I didn't throw in at least one football question, but it's not a question about the game. It's really a question about you. We have a lot of game days left this season. What's game day like for Packy?
Well, in COVID-19 or normally, because
Either one, either or both.
So normally this year has totally been very unique in the fact that because of Kelly Cares is kind of in a holding pattern, that doesn't keep me as busy in terms of people coming in for games and whatnot. But then also my hat for, not for Kelly Cares, but for ND, people coming into town. Normally I'm probably have 30 to 40 people every weekend that's a home game, and I have 8 tops, and there have been times that I don't even have 8. So it's like I have a whole bunch of time on Saturdays that I never had before. I get to see my husband a lot quicker because there's even the post game stuff is so much quicker. There's no, bump, bump, and you're out. He's out of there. So it's a little surreal. I'm not going to lie to you. I have people said, "Oh, I wish I could go to a game." I go, if you've never been to a game, I wish you would just wait one more year, to get back to, because even though I know the people in the neighborhood have like, their families are still coming in and they're getting together, and, and still in small and responsible groups, but it's not the same as when you look out and I could pull up to the stadium and park with nobody stopping me because there's plenty of parking. There's no parking passes this year. That's a little surreal, isn't it? So,
Very.
yeah, exactly. And I think of like my first time at the stadium was the spring game, and I didn't have the credentials that I was supposed to have to park. So I was the illegal parker that day, and I couldn't get to a spring game, let alone like now you can just pull up to the stadium. And so it kind of feels like a little bit like the Twilight Zone, where you think you're supposed to be there, but doesn't feel like you're really there. But I am very impressed when I tell my daughter and to tell her friends, they do a great job. I think the band and the kids have done a great job of carrying the crowd minus 60,000, 65,000 other attendees.
Well, we have a couple students on the call tonight, so I'm sure they'll be excited to hear that feedback.
Oh, good.
So before we wrap up, I want to point out that we had a participant, a doctor, who was kind enough to answer Trudy's question in the chat, if people are interested to learn more. And I think it's time for us to wrap up. Pocky, we thank you so much for your courage, for your inspiration, and mostly for your openness and your willingness to share your story with us. We're deeply grateful, and we certainly wish you many more years of good health for you and your family. I want to thank everybody who joined us here tonight. We can let folks know the recording for the meeting will be made available, and so we hope that many more people can share Pocky's story and be inspired by it. We would like to also let folks know Notre Dame Women Connect hopes to bring other inspirational women in the Notre Dame family to you, so watch for those announcements on our website and in our newsletter and on all the social channels. With that, I'm going to ask Anne to close us in prayer, which we do so well at Notre Dame.
Thanks, Karen. Just a context for our prayer. I am at St. Francis High School in Mountain View, or founded in the tradition of Holy Cross, which is the founders of Notre Dame. And one of the missions of a Holy Cross educator is to help a young person to know and understand that they have a purpose in life, that they have been created by God for purpose. And Packy, I was thinking as you were sharing your story and you mentioned purpose and being a teacher, thank you for doing that for us today, helping us to open our eyes to what your purpose and our purpose might be for one another. So I'd like to pray in particular today for Valeria Espinel. Valeria was a resident of Baden Hall. She's from Guayaquil, Ecuador. And Olivia Lara Rojas. She's a resident of Kavanaugh Hall from Santa Cruz de la Sierra in Bolivia. We lift up these two young women who are with God. We pray for their friends, for their families. And let us pray. Good and gracious God, for the strength you have given us, we thank you. For the health you have blessed us with, we thank you. For the women who are going through breast cancer and their families, we ask you to strengthen their mind, body, and spirit. You have no hands but our hands. You have no feet but our feet. For the love, light, and grace that our hands and hearts, souls, and bodies give to one another, we thank you. Be with every woman, man, and child who is sick and encourage them as only you can. We remember in a special way all those who have died. We lift up their memories and their legacies. For all members of the Notre Dame family and for those who made today possible, in particular, Packy, Kelly, her family, Brian, and her children, we thank you. We ask all of these prayers through Christ our Lord. Amen. Amen. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Thanks, Pocky.
Thank you. Be well, people. Go Irish.
Take care.
Thank you, everybody.